communities that will be affected by proposed pipelines. Most notably the Enbridge Gateway pipeline, which will span 1,780 kilometers from the Alberta tar sands to the Pacific Northwest coast, and the Keystone XL pipeline, which will go from Hardisty, Alberta, all the way down to the Gulf Coast refineries in Texas. And so this is a picture from the Wet'suwet'en Action Camp that we did last year in Wet'suwet'en traditional territory on the Maurice River watershed, where Enbridge wants to build a river crossing for the Enbridge Gateway pipeline right over the sacred salmon spawning beds, of which the Unistoten clan have used for a food source, for a sacred connection to Mother Earth, for essentially the representation of that umbilical cord to the sacredness of Mother Earth is what that salmon spawning bed represents. Ben and I almost drowned on it the other year. Yeah. That's another story though. Yeah. But they want to build a freaking pipeline crossing there, and it's absolutely crazy. And the federal government injected $6 million into First Nations to train workers on pipeline construction. Meanwhile, there's 54,000 workers in Alberta or in British Columbia dependent on the salmon industry, and that doesn't include all the ecotourism and everything else that comes with that. But the Enbridge Gateway, if it's put through, will create a couple thousand jobs for a little while, and then it'll only take 100 people to maintain that pipeline after that. And so it's absolutely insane, why they would put so much at risk for, just big oil's interests. And so part of our work, with IEN, supporting communities is, as usual, we rely a lot on working in a framework of solidarity, and I think this is a really important framework to understand that is different than what a lot of other groups do. We just returned from the United Kingdom, where we supported a couple frontline community leaders to confront British Petroleum, otherwise known as BP, at their AGM. We went there with fisherfolk from the Gulf Coast, and we organized a media strategy where we consistently tied tar sands to Gulf Coast, and they did the same, tied Gulf Coast to tar sands. Don't let what happened in the Gulf Coast happen in the tar sands, because BP's coming into the tar sands now. They're the last global major to come in, and we're trying to stop them. And so in that framework though, in the media that came out of that, you had a situation where everybody from a strategic perspective was telling us, well, the story's not tar sands this year, it's all Gulf Coast. But you know what? It was Gulf Coast and tar sands, because we worked in solidarity, we got the message out, and we worked in unity, and we were one united force. And so there's something to be said about solidarity. And one of the ways that we as a grassroots network that's severely under-resourced compared to some of these other groups that are really rather well funded, doing environmental justice work, environmental work, or some of the PR machinery attached to the PR campaigns that the government and the oil sector have, is by utilizing direct action as part of our toolkit. IEN has organized in partnership with the Ruckus Society, the Indigenous Peoples Power Project, a number of direct actions over the last few years, which really the focus was to elevate communities' voices into the media and to magnify the issues that those communities were facing to the world. And it's a really effective strategy and a really important strategy. And there's many different approaches that you can use when implementing civil disobedience in your organizing culture. But there's also a lot to be said about knowing what you're doing, being prepared, and being able to prove that you're not putting anyone in danger or putting yourself in danger. That's a really important thing. And for more information on that, I strongly encourage you to get in touch with the Ruckus Society and the Indigenous Peoples Power Project. We work real close with them. They kick ass. Part of our pipeline work, we've been working with Rising Tide Montana, as well as working with tribal groups all along the right-of-way. Last year, we had the International Tar Sands Resistance Summit, which we co-convened with Rising Tide Montana and brought together, college students, tribal members, landowners, all together to discuss, strategies and tactics on resisting tar sands infrastructure, on what works, and, most importantly, I think, on what don't work. So that we can collectively grow our information, our intelligence that we have, and become, stronger. And so, what do First Nations want? Well, the answers are varied, but the emerging consensus is that, a moratorium on any new expansion or existing applications until the cumulative environmental, cultural, social, human health, ecological health, and treaty rights impacts have been assessed and mitigated. Now, that said, you know, there's a lot of groups that are like, hell no, shut this down. But that's kind of like the kind of overall consensus that folks have been handing out. And there's lots of groups who are like, slow it down. There's no one answer, and I don't claim to represent any particular voice. I'm just reporting out on what we've heard. There's some technical stuff here, you can read all that stuff. But I think the most important thing that's really important is that First Nations people want to have the right to free, prior, and informed consent respected as defined by the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is international law, which has been ratified by Canada in their own cryptic, messed up way, you know, which essentially said we're going to interpret this based on our own policies, but which means we're not going to do shit with it. But the right to free, prior, and informed consent, for those of you that don't know, does anybody know what it means? What does it mean? Sorry, real quick.
You have to ask for agreements coming from free before action begins. Right.
Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Did you have anything to add to that?
Seems to be included in all conversations at all levels.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is very important, you know, at all conversations at all levels. You know, I think the definition of free, prior, and informed consent is very vague. It is right, though, that free meaning no coercion, no messing with, you know, how you become informed about a particular project that's going to affect your land base by companies or by government. You know, prior meaning before the stuff happens. You know, an informed consent meaning the right to say no. Okay, that's basically what it means. It means the right to say no. And I think it's really important to understand here in Canada that as First Nations peoples, we have, like I mentioned, a unique political and legal relationship with the federal government of Canada that's at par legally with the provincial entities, if not above. Okay, I would interpret it as above. These priority rights, these constitutionally protected rights, require companies, require the province who has jurisdiction over natural resources to consult with First Nations, all right, at the earliest inception of an idea. That's not like after the environmental impact assessment has been done and you integrate a chapter on traditional land use impacts. That means right in the boardroom when they're talking about it, before they put an application in, there's got to be First Nations sitting at the table. Okay. This is just a picture near Fort Mackay, Cree Nation, Councillor Orr. When they discovered a three-sided tailings pond was leaching into their wetlands. There was there's just one side not there. It was like oil leaching into their wetlands. I want to encourage all of you to take action, you know, in your own way, find your own way. Many of you already have recognized many of your faces in the room. I mean, there's many things you can do. You can donate money, you can donate your, you know, resources, you can make art, make banners, you can donate your time, show up. Like you are right now. There's a lot of different ways you can take action here in Toronto. I mean, Bay Street's right there. This is the core of, this is the beating heart of Canada's financial sector. You know, you can take action at a local, you can do local action, you know, find local groups. EJ Toronto is a spectacular group to plug into here in Toronto. There's many other ones as well. You know, and find ways to plug in. I mean, the gentleman who spoke from Montreal, there's some kick-ass groups in Montreal that have been taking action on this this pipeline that's been put on hold because of the economic crisis, but you know, that stuff changes fast. A lot of the projects that got put on hold are right back on. They got financing again now that the markets are recovering. So, you know, if you're in Montreal, you know, find groups to plug in with over the Trailbreaker issue, because that's going to connect tar sands to the eastern seaboard and to European markets. All right, these guys are thinking big, and they're thinking long term, they're thinking multi-generation, and so we have to do the same thing when we think about our social movement framework organizing. You know, there's different targets. You know, I mentioned BP, I mentioned banking institutions, or maybe I didn't, but I am now. You know, there's multiple banks. Every single Canadian bank is financing tar sands companies, but the banks, you know, they'll tell you that, oh, we don't do project-specific financing, but that's a load of BS. Okay, they give chunks of money to these companies, okay, and the companies can spend them wherever they want. Where do you think they're spending them? They're spending their loans from the banks on the most capital-intensive projects that they're doing, and that's tar sands. All right. Another really important thing is tar sands free institutions. We say tar sands free cities, but I think, you know, it's important if you're part of an institution, a union, you know, if you work for a transport company, if you work for a university, you know, you've got ties with your municipal government. It's important that we continue to always advocate, you know, for tar sands free space, you know, that we're not going to use fuel derived from the tar sands. This is a really important thing that needs to gain a lot of steam, especially in the United States, who buys most of the tar sands. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I could get into, but you know, I strongly encourage you to check out our website. We've got some kick-ass materials that we just had developed that are all available on the website for download, that kind of clearly define all of the campaign areas that IEN's involved in. So I strongly suggest that you go there. Dave Vassy wrote most of them, so thanks, Dave. Mad shout out to Dave from EJ Toronto. And here's my contact information. Check it out. Give me a call. Add me on Facebook. Add me on Twitter. I'm really approachable. Any information that you'd like, I'll do my darndest to get it to you. If I don't have it, I'll connect you with the people that do. And I just again want to really wish everybody a happy Mother's Day, and yeah, that's about it for now.